A report by the World Bank has found that 133 million Nigerians are currently living in poverty. Some of the key drivers of poverty were due to a lack of access to health, education, living standards, employment and security. A survey conducted in 109 districts in 36 states in Nigeria found that multidimensional poverty is high in rural areas where 72% of the people are poor. That's compared to 42% in urban areas. Poverty reduction remains stagnated since 2015 under the regime of President Muhammadu Buhari. And the COVID-19 pandemic made a severe dent in that progress. Meanwhile, World Bank economists warned that rising inflation, persistent population growth and the war in Ukraine are threatening Nigeria's poverty reduction aspirations to lift 100 million people out of poverty by 2030. Strategy and governance expert Adeyemi Mapaderun joins us now to talk a little bit more about this. He joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. Perhaps let's just first start with the figures that we're talking about now. What is the most apt comparison when we look at where Nigeria is now in terms of those poverty figures?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Let me start by saying that the multidimensional poverty index, as recently released by the National Bureau of Statistics, is actually a novel survey. It's a result of a novel survey which the MBS, undertook. And I think it's perhaps the first that the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria will undertake since 2010. Having said that, the result of that survey is significant in a number of ways. The first is that apart from being the first MPI survey conducted to establish the level of poverty in Nigeria, aside the monetary index, which the World Bank hitherto used, in which case, if you live on $1.90, below $1.90, you are considered to be living below the poverty line. The multidimensional poverty index is a more composite survey which measured, access to quality education, good health care. It's basically the report, the result is basically an outcome of that survey. Having said that, I need to clarify that the figure of 63%, which is 133 million Nigerians out of the estimated 200 million population living below poverty line, is actually a little bit exaggerated. The reason I said this, yes, it's a bit exaggerated because when you compare it to the monetary index, which is about 43%, you discover that there is a huge gap. Why is that gap that way? It is because it became imperative, and I think the United Nations Development Program also initiated this. We needed a means of measuring poverty in a pragmatic manner, rather than on a more theoretical basis. In other words, there is the sense in which $1.90, right, might actually give you a good life in some developing countries. So what we're looking at now is based on what is existing, healthcare system, access to education in the, in the country under consideration. It will help.
Okay, so let me ask as you're talking about the contextual understanding or definition of the poverty line in Nigeria, I see that it ranges from 27% in some areas to 91%. So what are we talking about in terms of the quality of life? As you say, it is different from country to country, and I'd imagine the same can be said about from state to state, given the different levels of insecurity as well.
Good question. You know, Nigeria is a large and diverse country, and essentially Nigeria has, well, it's a federal system. Technically we have 3 levels of government, but you know, the federal government, which is the central government, the state, and the local government. And of course, access to education especially is more pronounced, you know, in the southern part of the country. And that is why that wide gap of between 27% and 90% was established by that survey. In the northeast and the northwest of Nigeria, you have a preponderance of poverty in those places because children don't go to school. Out of the about 12 million out of school children in Nigeria, almost 10 million in the north. So that is a huge chunk, which informs, you know, a higher level of poverty in those places. Again, the incidence of high population is another thing. You find a situation whereby the population, you know, in some parts of the country are growing at a rate that are far higher, you know, than the rate at which, you know, their local economies grow. And so this report actually only underscores what is already known, you know, about the situation in Nigeria, that there seems to be a wide gap between the quality of life of people in the southern part of Nigeria as against those in the northern part of Nigeria. And you know, this is a bit paradoxical because in terms of political power, you'll find a situation whereby there is hues and cry, you know, about the dominance of the North in Nigeria's political, you know, landscape. However, the statistics on ground, the facts on the ground, does not support that the people in the North are better off than the people in the South. And I think that is something of concern that political analysts should also try to investigate.
All right. So is there anything that is across the board, irrespective of region and political affiliation, in terms of government interventions? I believe that this is the first poverty index since 2010, because I want to look at if there can be any reported concrete progress since then.
Well, there has been. If we look back at the Millennium Development Goals, you know, which was succeeded by the Sustainable Development Goals, while Nigeria may not have performed exceptionally well, in some areas, I believe that some giant strides, you know, were taken. Back to your question as to the commonality in terms of these indices among the different people in Nigeria. In terms of security, for instance, security appears to be a pervasive concern, you know, in the country, of course, in different colorations. Even though it does appear that the southwest of Nigeria is more immune, if I may use that word, from security concerns. But that does not mean that we don't have pockets of insecurity. Another thing is the issue of access to health care. You know, maternal mortality and child mortality in Nigeria is also relatively higher, you know, in some parts than the others. Talking about the South is also not taken, you know, as a monolithic group, because that survey also shows that there seems to be more poverty at about 73% in the southeast of the country than you have in the southwest, which hovers a little over 60%. So there are different complexions, to all those indices. It's really difficult to pinpoint one index, that seems to run through all the different parts of Nigeria. It does appear to me that in the area of unemployment, for instance, the urban part of the country, which is largely in the south, seems to have a higher level, of unemployment, and that is not unexpected because of fewer opportunities for a whole lot of people who migrate into the cities, looking for greener pastures. That is not the case in the more rural side, which is agrarian in nature. So put side by side the World Bank mode of measurement in terms of the monetary index, it does appear that there are actually more people living in poverty in Nigeria. But one must also underscore the fact that it is not absolute poverty, in that the National Bureau of Statistics actually pointed out that out of the 4 or 5 factors, that were used in arriving at these figures, only about a quarter, of the population of Nigeria, suffers from deprivation in more than 2 of those areas. So while in the north, you might talk about poor access to education and healthcare, in other parts of Nigeria, it will be cost of living and unemployment.
Thank you so much for your time and insights. Strategy and governance expert Adeyemi Mapaderun speaking to us from Lagos, Nigeria. Let's leave it